Hi and welcome to my third Kemper Profiler related video. Today I'll be outlining why I switched from using a Yamaha DXR10 to a Kemper Powered Kabinet as my on-stage monitor. So if you've watched either of my previous videos, you'll know that I've been using a Yamaha DXR10 as my on-stage monitor, and although I was generally happy with it, there were a couple of things I didn't like. Firstly, by placing it on stage in the traditional wedge position, the sound would vary depending on whether I was standing directly in front of the high frequency horn or the main 10-inch driver. So by moving a few inches to the left or right, I was hearing a slightly different guitar sound. And secondly, it was the aesthetic. In other words, it's a black plastic box and therefore doesn't resemble the look of a traditional guitar speaker or combo. So I was offered a Kemper Powered Kabinet at a good price and decided to give it a go. And the upshot is I much preferred it to the DXR10. So why did I prefer it? Well, I like the aesthetics of it. It looks like a traditional guitar combo. It has the one and only control, i.e. the volume knob on the front, which makes it very easily accessible. It has a built-in tilt-back facility, so you can have the cabinet angled on stage rather than just flat on the floor. And the design of the speaker is such that as you move around in front of the cabinet, the sound doesn't change anywhere near as much as it does with a traditional FR cabinet where you've got a separate horn and driver. And probably most importantly, you can change the EQ curve of the Kemper Kabinet using the sweetening control in the output section of the Kemper Profiler. Now, when I was trying to find out exactly what the sweetening control was supposed to do, I found a very interesting article in one of the Kemper forums online where Christoph Kemper said that the frequency response of most FR cabinets, which are essentially PA speakers, is not actually that flat because they tend to have an inbuilt EQ curve which emphasizes the bass and treble frequencies. And some FR speakers do this more than others. He then goes on to say that the Kemper cone, which is the speaker used in the Kemper Kabinet, has a very flat response. In fact, it might almost be too flat because our ears are probably more used to an EQ curve where the bass and treble are increased slightly, i.e. a smiley face EQ curve. So the way that Kemper have addressed this is to have a sweetening parameter within the output section of the profiler, which allows you to dial in the amount of enhanced bass and treble you prefer. With the sweetening control on 0, the response is totally flat, and as you increase it, the bass and treble are raised to create this smiley face EQ curve. And based on the online article I mentioned earlier, Christoph Kemper indicated that when listening to music through the Kemper cone, he would set the sweetening control to around 6. So that suggests to me that with a sweetening control around 6, the Kemper cone has a frequency response that most of us would probably think of as FR. So when I'm tweaking my profiles at home, I tend to have the sweetening control on 6, but in a live context, you may well find that setting the sweetening control lower will reduce the treble and bass and therefore give a more mid-focus sound, and that might be more beneficial as it will help you cut through a band mix. So at a gig, if I'm struggling to hear myself but don't want to necessarily increase my on-stage volume, I sometimes turn down the sweetening control. So that means the treble and bass are therefore reduced, which has a kind of pseudo effect, if you like, of boosting the mid slightly. And that usually does the trick. And I can then normally hear myself much better without actually increasing the overall on-stage guitar volume. So I hope that explained why I've decided to switch from using a Yamaha DXR10 to a Kemper Powered Kabinet, and I hope it's also explained why I believe the sweetening control is a key factor when using a Kemper Kabinet. So thank you for watching. I hope you found it very useful, and see you next time.